Welcome back to the Power to Flourish podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Line, and do I have a treat for you today? My guest today is a celebrated choreographer, director, and educator with over 25 years of experience in dance, theater, and creative process. She is a former company member with the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company, director of Alexandra Beller Dances, and professor at universities throughout the country. She has since become a sought-after mentor helping artists and students cultivate brave, embodied, and meaningful creative practices. She's also an award-winning choreographer for theater and intimacy director and is the author of 2 books, The Embodied Conductor and her most recent, coming out in 2026, The Anatomy of Art, Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance. Her book, The Anatomy of Art, is a field guide for artists, a powerful blend of poetic insight, practical tools, and embodied wisdom that challenges makers to disrupt their habits, trust their instincts, and reimagine how they create. Whether in the studio or on the page, she brings clarity, rigor, and deep care to the messy, beautiful work of making art. I am so excited to welcome to the show, Alexandra Beller. Welcome to the Power to Flourish podcast, where science meets the art of a beautiful life. I'm Dr. Andrea Line, positive psychologist, giftedness expert and coach, and modern-day spiritual godmother to brilliant, deep-feeling women. This isn't just another self-help podcast. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space to come back to yourself. Each week, we'll explore the emotional experience of gifted, sensitive women and what it means to live a life that feels as beautiful as it may look. Because flourishing isn't a luxury, it's your birthright, and your life is waiting. This is the Power to Flourish podcast. Well, welcome, Alexandra, to the show. I'm so excited to have you. And why don't you just start by sharing your journey, how you got to doing this work? Because I know you've had a very interesting path.
Yeah, I started as a professional dancer. I became a choreographer. Inside that era, I became a teacher. Mostly of dance and choreography, and along the way got a few degrees, one of them in movement analysis, which really led me more into a therapeutic and trauma-informed side of the world, and being able to cut through the layers between meaning and movement and past and present and wanting and feeling and needing, sensing and intuiting. So that led me into more of like therapeutic exchange with people. And all of those life experiences led me to want to write about them. So then I finally started writing as well.
Yeah. So why don't we start there? Because you have this book that's being birthed as we speak now, but perhaps it's having been birthed already by the time this airs. Why don't you share what the title of the book and sort of the basic message that you want readers to get out of this?
Yeah. The book is called The Anatomy of Art, Unlocking the Creative Process for Theater and Dance. But I do think it bridges beyond just theater and dance artists because creativity is such an innate part of all of us.
Right.
And it was really born about a decade ago when I was doing a lot of artistic feedback for mostly choreographers. And often there would be a question I would ask during feedback. They would have just shown their work to a small group of people. And then I would ask them a question and the room would just change, like get charged, positively charged, and people's spines would get straighter and I would hear a little intake of breath. And I thought, these questions are really meaningful. And I wish that somebody had been asking me these questions when I was trying to find my voice and vision as an artist. And so I thought, well, let me write down these questions. And over time, it became clear to me that it didn't feel vulnerable enough to just write questions, that I needed to put myself behind a statement as well. And so the book just kept expanding out over years. Oh, I should do scores. I should do embodiment exercises. And it became this like very fleshed out book, workbook, memoir, etc.
Wow. How long have you been working on it?
A decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, this baby's ready to be
Yeah,
birthed, I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, what a labor of love. Well, you have such rich experience. And even though my audience, I don't think they would all necessarily identify as like a professional creative, I believe, and I know you agree, that we all have creativity in us, in our DNA somehow, some way. But I would say that many of the women who listen to this podcast are they are very bright. They're incredibly capable, but they may be professional creative, some of them, but a lot of them, I think, feel disconnected from their creative expression. It's like, they're living life. They might be living it even sort of well, so to speak, but they're living almost adjacent to themselves. It's like
Mhm,
they're just not fully embodying their creative expression, or they might not even know what that means. So
mhm.
if you were speaking, I mean, maybe you can speak to, your typical, your reader as a dancer, or someone in the arts, but maybe even just like the broader audience of women that whether it's professionally or personally, like that creative expression. What do you think is going on there in your experience when people get disconnected,
Yeah,
and how you use your methodologies to kind of bring them back to
yeah,
themselves?
yeah. Beautiful, rich question. For one thing, I think it's useful for us to remember that creativity is not just about art making,
Mm,
and it's also not about producing anything in particular.
mhm,
That we are creative when we are problem solving, when we're adapting, negotiating, when we're figuring out how to phrase a sentence at a tricky juncture in a conversation. All of
mhm.
this is creativity.
Right.
And creation is invention, and invention at its heart in our species is problem solving.
Mhm,
So we are being creative all the time. I think we may not always be noticing it or giving ourselves credit for how creative we are. And I will say, in my experience, women in particular, um, and um, and people who are part of like an underrepresented, marginalized, or
mm,
oppressed group,
mhm,
including disabled people. When the world is not made for you,
mhm,
when the world does not privilege you, you are
mhm,
constantly being creative because you're trying
mhm.
to work around the
Sure.
system. And the
Right.
system wasn't made for the neurodiverse and the disabled. And, white supremacy was not made for people of color, et cetera. The patriarchy wasn't made for female identifying people. So we are being creative all the time. I think we sometimes conflate creativity with art. And I think a lot of what's happening, you asked what was happening, is that I think we are conditioned to value and valorize metrics other than intuition.
Mhm,
And even in writing this book and in sending like articles out for peer review, often I'll have an idea that feels unique to me. At least in my lived experience, I came up with
mhm,
it. Did somebody else also come up with that? Potentially, yes.
mhm.
But I didn't get it from reading somebody else's work. And I'm often getting told, like, you have to cite this, you have to. And I'm like, but I thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can do some research and, do a deep dive into like, is anybody else thinking about this? But what you're really asking me to do is validate it with somebody else's idea. And that feels like it hooks into just this lifelong centering of metrics that are not inner metrics. And
Mhm,
so the big thing that I'd say is like, what do you feel? And often when people go to see art, especially more experimental or explorational art that doesn't feel concrete to them, they can have feelings of resistance or rejection of the art. I don't like this because I feel stupid because I don't know what it quote unquote means.
right.
And often artists are like, but what'd you feel?
Yeah.
And I think we do that. It's too cavalier sometimes because I think there is some genuine fear in that audience member that's looking at a piece of art and is like,
Mm,
I don't want to feel stupid. I'm going to put that feeling onto how I feel about the art. This is opaque,
mm,
so I don't like it.
mhm,
And there's something about like sitting with the unknown and letting something resonate with you or not, but like finding like what is the resonance or the friction between you and this thing. And it's what we do when we're tasting the soup that we made. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
is that it? And the thing is, when we're in situations like that, it's often a no-brainer. Like you taste your soup and it needs salt. And you know it right away. Or at least, it needs something. What is it? A little acid or a little salt, or it needs a little more,
Mm-hmm.
and you can feel it, even if you're not a great chef. And I think, you move your couch in the living room when you've moved into a new apartment and you're like, not quite. Oh,
Yeah.
there. Right. Yeah. I want to face and you feel it.
Right.
And then we forget to use the body as a metric in so many other situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the portal to creativity, is letting the body start to have sovereignty over some of our decision making, and not always feel that we have to validate everything with somebody else's metric or idea.
Yeah. If you've been listening to the podcast lately and finding yourself longing for a summer that feels more spacious, grounded, and nourishing, I want to share something I'm opening very intentionally this season. It's called the Summer Sanctuary. This is a small, private mentoring experience for women who don't just want to get through the summer exhausted and disconnected from themselves, but who want support creating a season that actually feels restorative, emotionally grounding, and aligned. This is intentionally very intimate, and I'll only be opening a few spots this summer. So if it resonates with you and you're curious to learn more, you can find the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode. Well said. I have so many questions stemming from that. And so one of the things that just has popped into my head is, I think a lot of women listening do resonate with this feeling of, or at least some point in their life, feeling like they're cut off from their body. They're just really cut off. They're conditioned, whether it was trauma, whatever the reason. I think a lot of us, especially in Western society, have been like, we learn like just use this my head right here, right?
Yeah.
Just you function from up here because that's what makes sense. And I love the example you gave, because it's so everyday, like with the soup, or like moving in. And if you're not an interior designer, okay, but like, the couch feels better over here than there. And like, how do you explain it, right? You don't have to necessarily go to school to analyze. I mean, you might want to, but you don't have to, if you just learn to listen. And so what I said to you before we started recording is, as a psychologist, as someone who has spent hours and hours and years in therapy spaces with people, and I'm a big proponent of the therapy space. However, there are some things that are better unlearned and perhaps relearned outside of the therapy room. And so I love for you to talk about some of your experiences, some of the practices that you have done in the past. Again, maybe some of them with dancers, but even just like what an everyday person who isn't necessarily studying dance might think about if they're listening to this and going, oh, I would love to be more connected to my body and listen to my body in that way. I have no idea where to even begin.
Yeah. I think there are so many places where the body actually knows more than the attic brain, like where like the lower brain, second brain, enteric nervous system, gut. Those aren't just, metaphors. There is a ton of neurological research around 100 million neurons in the gut and second brain, et cetera. So we do have this ability to respond to the world physically and emotionally through the body. And we don't need to defend it any more than when we say no to somebody, we need to defend it, which that has taken me a long time to learn. And I'm still teaching myself that lesson.
Yeah.
What I often find with students and clients is that there are these beautiful places where we can um, let systems talk to each other. And by systems, I mean like the physical system, emotional, social, even political, relational, intellectual. And that a client or student will come to me and they'll say something, and in that sentence will be a word where I see the portal between, oh, that's something I would use to talk about the body. Oh, but that's also something I would use to talk about the way I life plan, or the way I communicate with my partner, or the way I parent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if somebody says, I'm just feeling really lost. I don't know which way to go. I'm trying to make this decision. I'm at a like fork in the road in my career. I'm trying to figure out which one. And I just keep, volleying back and forth between these two decisions. And I just feel stuck and frozen. And
Oh,
I'm
I'm sure a
listening.
lot of women are right now saying, yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I
Right.
feel. Yeah.
And so two things about that. One, these are all things you could say physically. I'm lost in a
Yes.
forest. I don't know which way to go on this street. I don't know which step to walk with next, right?
Right.
So I do think that sometimes we can get so wound up in our heads that it becomes just this web that we can't quite get through. And because there's so much storytelling we do in our heads, and this idea is attached to this whole emotional heaviness, sometimes the body can slip under the radar of our alert system. And so, a client will come to me, and it's a very emotional thing. Like, they're trying to decide whether or not to stay with their partner in their marriage, and they've got kids, and it's like one of the biggest decisions they're going to make.
Yeah.
And it's so freighted and so loaded. And I feel like, I don't know that it's so useful to go into the feelings right now. I'm not saying there's never a use. Of course, there's plenty of use for like talking about feelings and feeling feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those feelings become a story, and the story is hard to get away from. So they're having trouble trusting their intuition about which way to go. So I build an exercise, a walking spatial exercise, where I'm like, I put little colored dots on the floor, and like, when you see this dot, you're going to turn left. And if you see this dot color, you're going to turn right. And, or like doing an improvisation in which, at certain beats or at certain places in the room, they're going to make a spatial decision on a dime. No thinking, just feeling, letting their body be like, I know where to go. I know what's next. I want a level change. I want to turn the corner. I want to turn 180, no 90. And they seem to have no trouble having immediate, intuitive, physical ideas about directionality. And I believe that putting your body into that kind of practice, when you're trying to be in that kind of life practice, really does make an effect, have an effect. I sometimes have people who are like, I'm having a lot of trouble asserting my boundaries, and I'm having trouble saying no. I'm having trouble not centering other people's needs in my life. And great, let's do some contact improvisation. We're going to do a little weight sharing. And I'm going to ask you to lean into me, and we're going to move together. But if you feel like you're just following, if I feel like you're just following, I'm going to stop moving, and I'm only going to follow you. So yes, we're in collaboration and cohesion, and it's about you. You're the leader of this. And if I feel that you are letting me take over your decision making, I'm going to stop and just give you weight, or pull my weight away from you, because it's clearly too much. Like, holding my weight, you're losing yourself. So if I feel like you're losing yourself, I'm going to pull my weight away, and you're going to have this physical, neurological like feedback. Oh, yeah. I gave up self. And I do feel like the repetition of that kind of practice in the body changes something in the way that we feel in the world and in those situations. And I have asked people, students, clients, after we do something like boundary work, what their next conversation with their partner was like. And they're like, yeah, it changed. That changed.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to see that without, making New Year's resolutions and writing down the codes on a cheat sheet, and nothing wrong with any of those things, but without really thinking about it, or making any kind of determined, decisions about how I'm going to change in my conversation, things do change.
Yes. I think that's what's so exciting, and I'm sure again a lot of women who have lived this a lot of their experience up here in their head, and they're like, I don't even know how to get out. Like, are listening to you. I'm listening to you describe this, and while I have never personally worked with you, I've been in my own version of kind of just getting outside of the typical talking space. And as intelligent women, we can talk, and it's great. And we like to do it. And it's, this podcast, it's wonderful. But there's just something so powerful and beautiful. I'm imagining you in the space with your clients doing this. And that the transferability, I think maybe is really underestimated by people. And you're like, okay, how is this exercise, going to translate into the conversation that I know I need to have. But you don't have to calculate it. It transfers.
Yeah, 100%. Another one that,
Probably even more so than
yeah,
if you
I
right?
do
Because
think so.
it's really concrete, that
Yeah.
experience.
And cumulatively probably done 8 or 9 years of talk therapy, and I'm still in it and appreciate it and, enjoy it and have gotten plenty of reward out of it. I wouldn't keep doing it. And I think some of my biggest shifts have been bodily. One thing that comes up a lot is I work with dynamics called effort in this Laban movement analysis system that I teach. And one of the motion factors we talk about is control, and another is force, and they don't need to go together. And so when I'm working on control, I often notice that people are applying a lot of force. And so I'll say, what happens if you don't use force when you use control? And their bodies kind of flip out a little bit. And I'll say, is this feel like it's familiar to you? Is this a habit that if you control something, you feel that you need to do it forcefully? And of course, if you've grown up female presenting and identifying, like, it often has been something that you've had to do because you're not being listened to and you do need to assert yourself, etc. Right. But then it can become the default. And I'll say, what if we used the same kind of force and control relationship that we use when we're threading a needle? Delicate, specific, highly controlled, not forceful, not tense, right? Not brutal. Control feels like it often just defaults to this idea of forceful, even sometimes oppressive control. Because that's often how we've experienced receiving it.
Right. A much more masculine.
Yeah, but if we're gonna draw this society toward a matriarchy, which I think it's where it's gotta go, this is the kind of work that I think we need to do, which is like, well, it's the way that the patriarchy controls things with force. What's the opposite of that? Can I have a ton of control with delicacy, with specificity? Can I replace force with specificity?
I love the visuals that you're using, like threading the needle. I'm like, that is such a great visual. I tried to actually do that recently. It's very hard when you get to middle age and you need your glasses. I'm like, when I was a little girl, this was a lot easier. Yeah. But it's such a concrete visual where, again, I think sometimes when we talk about these things or talk about disconnection and even talking about creativity, it could feel abstract, or it can feel like, oh, I have an idea of what that means. Like with creativity, right? I have an idea in my head of what that means. I have it in a box. I've categorized it, right? Or even looking at a piece of art, let me categorize it. How do I categorize it? And if I can't categorize it, it makes me feel uncomfortable. So I just love how you're taking these different ideas and making them so embodied, so easy, or I think easier for women who struggle with that to like begin, not that they have to wrap their brain around it, but kind of start like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes a lot of sense, because I think if you've grown up, using the control and the force as an example, you grow up seeing one way, and it's very hard to imagine doing another way. And if,
Yeah.
you might even know that this way doesn't work as effectively for
But
you,
it's familiar.
but it's familiar. And again, I think a lot of women, I have a lot of women in leadership, whether they're leading families or they're leading the boardroom or whatever, wherever they are in the world, um, struggle with this. I'm an intelligent, capable, creative woman trying to find that right balance. I know I've certainly struggled. I mean, I think there was a time my husband can remember, I'm sure, where I would come home frequently after work and it was like the same refrain. And I worked in a male dominated, very big ego kind of place, but I would just say, I feel like my voice is not being heard. I feel like my voice is not being heard, right? And what do we do if we feel like that's one example? Like, do I need to scream? Do I need to talk
Well,
louder? Like,
yeah, I
what is
mean,
it that I need to do? And so yeah,
yeah,
it's the
as
world.
soon as you said that, I felt like, well, there's one of those words, right? Your voice is this kind of metaphorical thing, right? Your ideas are not
Yes.
being heard. Your
Yes.
self is not being taken in, but your voice
Mhm.
is also this physical thing. Go into
Mhm.
the shower and hum, sing
Mhm.
a song in
Mhm.
your car on your way home.
Yep.
Use your voice.
Yes.
Leave audio messages instead of sending text to your friends. Like, use your voice more.
Well, it's so interesting because this was probably over a decade ago when that was going on in my life. And I have been very intentional over, I mean, it was always a part of my life, but all the things that you just described, like I literally sing on stages, not to prove anything,
Yeah.
but as like a reminder for myself, these are ways I do leave the audio message. I'm the friend and the sister that's leaving all the audio messages. They know I can get lengthy. And then the podcast, right? And then I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do a
Yeah.
podcast. And so it
Start a
is
podcast.
funny how life has a way of like,
Hmm.
let's show you how to harness your voice. I don't need to, I don't need to yell. I can
Yeah.
just be me and trust that the right people who are open, not everyone is going to listen to my voice. And part of
Hmm.
my decision making was getting out of certain situations. But
Sure.
some of that is yeah, not just shutting down completely and saying no one is going to hear me, so therefore I will mute myself. But
Yeah.
finding the outlets, that was certainly the case for
Yeah.
me.
And then also maybe going backwards into it and saying, like, so when I feel unheard or I notice myself being unheard, what else is that adjacent to?
Mm,
Um, I have this really,
mm.
I'm not going to value it, but I will say unfair of me response. My partner, who's an exceedingly considerate person, loves music. And so he walks around with headphones on all day long. Like, until we're
Yeah.
having quality time, he often has headphones on. So he can have his music because I'm neurodiverse in a different way than he is, and I
Yes.
can't have music. Like, it's overstimulating.
Yeah.
So to protect me, he wears headphones around the house almost all day long. And I'll often have a moment where he's like coming down the stairs and I see him from the couch and he's maybe looking at something, and I'll say his name, his name, his name, a little louder, a little louder, a little louder. And I feel this like rage and helplessness well up in
Mm,
me. Totally unfair. He's got headphones on as a generous gesture to me, right?
yeah.
But I feel this like overwhelming rage. And so I started sitting with that feeling in that moment, being like, okay, for one thing, this is not about my partner. For another thing, this is a really interesting moment in my body. What is this like disproportionate amount of, yes, I can feel where that hooks into
Yeah.
my childhood, and I
Mhm.
can also feel where in my body it is living. So let me sit with it and listen to that part of my body and maybe let that part move a little bit. Maybe I'm noticing it in my sternum, in my chest. So what if I put my fingertips
Mm,
on my sternum and just, imagine that my sternum had a crayon on it and was drawing against a piece of paper, or that my sternum was like a little stream of smoke coming off of a candle and I could see it, moving in the air. And what if I just try and let that part that's feeling so much intensity right now have a little bit of time to be in the driver's seat, have a little bit of sovereignty, and see what happens.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I this thought just popped in my head. How early in your life did you realize you had this I don't know if you would say this about yourself, but it seems apparent to me that you certainly have a one of your gifts is being so attuned to your body and using your body. Is that something from, like, the youngest ages that you can remember?
I think in a way it's a huge silver lining from two different, I will say, traumas. One of
Mm,
them is being alone a lot when I was a kid and
mhm,
teenager. And the other is that I grew up inside dance in a body that was not acceptable to the
mm,
dance world, especially like the
mm.
80s dance world.
Yeah, yeah,
I was, quote unquote, too big.
yeah.
And so I was often not really compared to, like, I wasn't the ideal that they were really force feeding down everybody else's throat about like what to look like and what to go for.
Mhm,
They sort of dismissed it for me because they're like, you're not going to look like that anyway. So what does it
mm,
matter? And so, in
mm,
a way, because they sort of left me on the sideline in a lot of dance classes and they didn't really take me seriously, I was able to feel my way into things that a lot of people were being pushed to aestheticize their way into. Look like
mm,
this, do it like that.
mm,
And they were like, you're not going to be able to look like that.
mm.
So it doesn't matter what you look like. And
Yeah,
then I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll feel it then. And
yeah,
so I think between those two things, in a way, it gave me a window into that inner metric that I was talking about before that we get so conditioned against.
mhm,
Um, and because I wasn't going to match the outer metric, they sort of
mhm.
stopped pushing it on me
Yeah,
in a certain way.
yeah. Yeah, it's a silver lining for sure.
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you before we started recording too. I just came back from Hawaii, and, what flashed in my head as you were describing and it's so my daughter was in gymnastics and a similar that unfortunately, again, in our American particularly, our and maybe other certain, Western countries, but this, um, really unfortunate yeah,
Yeah.
just unfortunate mixing of, like, body image stuff with what should be so life-giving and joyful, and, like, what is more joyful than dance? Like, I just feel like it's so joyful, and, one thing that I'm thinking about in Hawaii is when I see both and they just had this huge I don't know if it's a competition, but it's called Mary Monarch on the Big Island, and, people flying from all over, and they have like, they do the traditional, hula, all the different groups. And I'm looking at all the men, women, everyone,
Hmm.
and all different kinds of bodies. There's no I don't watch them and think, "Oh, they're all a
Right.
certain type," right?
Yeah.
All different kinds of bodies, and I think it's so beautiful, and I just think about even their movement and everything. It's so fluid and free, and, I wish for America. I wish for the little girls, and I love dance, and I love things like gymnastics in it, and I'm always on the lookout for places that, you know, aren't taking that path, which I do
Yeah.
think in the '80s and '90s hopefully by today, there are more places that aren't
Yeah.
putting that on kids, but, yeah, what a beautiful gift, though, that unfortunately you had to go through that, but that you came out the other side, like, so, so connected
Yeah,
to your
I think the
body.
triangulation between those 2 things and my neurodiverse brain
Yes.
just gave me access to, a very high level of interoception, being able to
Ye
feel the inside of my body.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm envious. I'm so envious. Um, oh my goodness, I have so many questions, and I know we could talk all day, but let me ask you, since we talked about creativity earlier, what do you think I mean, you've shared some examples, but I think already, when you find someone who is feeling either disconnected from their body, I guess it's one and the same, disconnected from themselves, disconnected maybe, or not as fluid in their creative process, What have you found? Are there some practical, maybe first steps that someone could take to begin to feel, because I recognize it could be a process, but to begin to feel that internal sense of safety, like that
Mhm.
relationship between the internal sense
Mhm.
of, feeling a little safer to
To
the creative process, or I don't know how I may not even be asking the question right, but I
Yeah.
guess how do you make that connection for people? How do you get them just in those beginning steps through
Well,
dance
I
or
I
movement?
think I often would probably have a few questions for them to fine-tune this next idea and listen to, like, where do they feel like they get lost or stuck or frozen in the process? And, I
Mhm.
might have more specificity for them given their answer. But one fairly general thing that I find quite ubiquitous is that we often are trying to be both intuitive and analytical at the same time, and they don't play
Mm.
well together. And
Mhm.
th- that's what I think often the inner critic is like we're in some kind of in flow state, intuition, sensing, feeling, intuiting, being, creating, divergent thinking, wildness, etc. And then poking into it, piercing it, and wounding it,
Mhm.
because that's a very tender space to be in and a vulnerable space to be in. And we are sitting inside the unknown in a really lovely, wild way. And then what we might call the inner critic, I think, is often the analytical mind. And I mean, I think it's often stemming from a real fear. And for one thing, I
Mhm.
do think we need to have a conversation with that fear at a separate moment.
Mhm.
So, what I often do is ask people what that relationship between like instinct, intuition, sensing, feeling, and logic, analysis, editing, criticism is.
Mhm.
Both super essential, both
Mhm.
for life and creativity and relationships. We need them both. The best artists have both in fairly equal measure,
Mm.
I think. But they don't live well together. They don't perform well together. And so I'll ask somebody what that relationship is like for them. When they're in that free flow state, can they stay there? What happens? And often I hear that there's this interjection. So we
Mm.
create a practice together, based on what that voice is like and how they respond to that voice. Um, to say, like, I hear you. I'm going to ask you to wait on this.
Mhm.
This is not a moment when I'm doing analysis or logic. I'm going to stay in intuition right now. And I suggest that people treat that voice the way they might treat their teenager who was not having an emergency and was popping into their office or bedroom at a moment when they were in some kind of workflow, creative
Yeah.
flow, or a
I'm laughing because
conversation.
I used to work
And
with a ton of teenagers who did that very thing.
so,
Yes.
if my teenager was not having an emergency and popped their head into my office while I was in the middle of book writing, I would probably turn and fairly lovingly say, I'm just right in the middle right now, but I will talk to you later. And then I
Yeah.
would go talk to them later.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's important to be honorable in
Mm.
our relationship to that analytical voice that is
Mm.
trying to alert us to something that we are worried about genuinely. I
Mhm.
don't think there's any part of us that's just being an ass and trying to sabotage us, right? I
Right.
think there's something real
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
and I would like to hear it just the way I want to hear what my teenager has to say, but
Yes.
not right now.
Right. That's
And I want
yeah.
to honor the practice of what's happening right now. And if I abandoned my book every time somebody sent me a text or somebody popped their head into my bedroom, I would not have a manuscript in right now, right?
Right.
I chose to value and honor it. And I did hopefully eventually get all those things responded to over time, but not at that moment. So I do think
Mm.
that separating those functions of the mind,
Mhm.
um, and saying, I hear myself thinking, I hear myself critiquing, I hear
Mhm.
myself analyzing. I
Mhm.
don't want to do that right now. So I'm going to pause this voice and I'm going to stay in wild space and let myself be playful.
I love how you have described that. And as someone who has specifically, I'll say in one of my areas where the perfectionism is coming up in my head. A lot of women struggle with that. Mine happens a lot around writing, so much around writing. And, but wherever it happens for people, right? It could happen. I mean, it certainly happened to me at times singing, although usually I can get right into the flow and like separate the two out.
Mm-hmm.
But for people have it in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have it everywhere, but it takes a lot of practice. You know, if you have allowed I love the teenager popping in, analogy, but if you've allowed that teenager to come in all the time and you just get derailed every time, it, it it's a big shift to move to I would imagine, right, just like a little bit more time staying in that wild, playful part
Yeah.
and practicing sending the teenager back to
Yeah.
where they were. And yeah, like just yeah, differentiating and even having the awareness, like the language you're using, I think it can be hopefully will be so helpful to people to say, these are just different parts of the mind. We need them both. They're both useful, but at different times. And in the creative process, that's not the time to be coming in and analyzing. And sometimes my husband and I'll use this too as a personal story. He's very analytical. I can be extremely analytical as well. But I like to play and I can get into a playful spot. So if I'm in like dreaming, visioning for our life, right? I have to ask him to just give me a moment. And before you shoot down all the big dreams with all the analysis of what's
Yeah.
realistic and everything, like, could you just hang out in the
Yeah.
playful part for
Yeah.
just a moment and we can come back to it and do the, analytical mind, but
Yeah.
just a moment, like, let's just play. And I do think that there's that practice and training ourselves, training our partners, whatever,
Yeah.
to
I also
allow for that.
I also think that it's circular in that that intuitive, creative, wild space often leads us towards detail and convergent thinking and specificity.
Yes.
And like, I'll start imagining my dream house, but then I'm thinking about, what the kitchen is going to look like. And then I start thinking about like, yeah, because then I'd be able to do this and cooking. And then I'm like, you know what? Actually, I could revamp our kitchen just a little bit for very little money. I should just move those things over to, and I
Right,
start
right.
having like a real convergent, like
Yes. Yes.
specificity. And then I feel like the opposite also happens. I noticed in editing my book, I'd be like really specific and editing and look, and that's not the right word. Why is that not the right word? What is the word? And then I'm like, that's not the right word because there's a little faulty thinking in this because actually this analogy, it's not chemistry, it's ecology. Hold on a second. Wait a
Mm.
minute. This whole chapter is built on shaky ground. Okay, hold on. I need to go back. I need to go read some stuff about ecology and chemistry in here, how people just, and it's like
Right,
one leads to
right.
the other. It is
Yes,
circuitous
yes.
or like a
Mhm.
lemniscate, like a Mobius
Yeah.
band.
Well, on that note, I really want to read your book, and I'll segue there. I am very excited about this book, even though I don't identify as a dancer. I love watching dancers. I did take some dance as a young person, but it's not something I stuck with. And I have a lot of friends who are in the dance world, so I'm excited about your book. Tell people where they can get the book, and then also just other places they can find you, because I'm sure I am not alone in being a new fan of yours, and just find out more about what you do. Where do you want people to go?
I have a really robust website that's got a lot of different places it branches off to, including a separate website for my book. And so I think just alexandrabellerdances.org is such a good hub. And there's free classes and there's essays and links to writing and that kind of thing and ways to connect with me.
Great. That is
Yeah.
amazing. And tell us just once again, I will put a link in the show notes so people will see that there too, but the name of your new book.
The Anatomy of Art, coming out through Bloomsbury. And right now, unfortunately, it's gotten a little bit delayed. It was supposed to be June, then September. I'm hoping it stays September, but
Yeah. It's not unheard
publishing.
of when
Yeah.
the dates. But we'll put it there. We'll have the show notes. And sometimes people can pre-register, right, to
Oh,
get
it's
a book.
available for
So
pre-order right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
pre-order. That's what I meant, pre-order.
Yeah.
So that's great. So I will highly encourage people to check you out there. Thank you so much, Alexandra. This has been, I could talk to you for at least another half hour,
Same.
easily. So fun, so fun. I want to go like move my body in the other room after this
Do it.
episode.
Do it.
Thank you so much. I always ask my guests one last question before we go. Because this is the Power to Flourish podcast, I would love to hear, and you can take a second to think, what does flourishing mean or look like for you at this season of life? Because I know that can look different at different times.
Yeah. And I was sitting in North Carolina, actually, at my best friend's house. We were sitting in, she's lucky enough to have a hot tub, and we were looking up at the stars. And I was saying, I feel like I'm at this crossroads in my career, and I've been identifying as this choreographer and artist for so long, but I also feel like I'm becoming this healer. And I feel like if I'm going to become a real master at one of them, I feel like I have to choose. And she said, what if you didn't choose anything right now? What if you just let yourself see where your feet take you? And I felt like in the middle of menopause, it felt like such a relief to think of not planning anything. And so I think for me, flourishing feels like rooted flow. I'm not aimless. I'm not wandering. I'm not without desire. But I am no longer determining or projecting myself in any particular direction towards an imagined outcome. And I've been asked a lot, like, oh, well, what are you hoping for with the book? Or what do you want? Or what's your 5-year plan? And I very consciously do not have a 5-year plan. No idea what will happen with this book releasing. I don't know where I'll be in the future. I don't know what I'm going to want. And I am enjoying living inside desire without goals.
Yeah, that is an amazing answer. And I don't know if it has something to do with the stage of life that we're in, but I feel very similarly at this stage of my life. It's an interesting tension to still have desire.
Yeah.
Like we're not dead yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's something about it that is, sort of like the strings have been cut. There's nothing attached as much.
It's very present. And maybe because there's less life ahead of me, probably, than behind me. I'm 53. So I'm guessing there's more life behind me than ahead of me. So maybe that like energy of like forward starts to recede a little bit. At least for me, I'm like, I'm not rushing anywhere. Like I'm pretty happy like riding on the arrow of time right now. And just like sitting here and as you said, it doesn't mean I'm devoid of hunger, desire, want, sensation. But I'm not imagining things in the future and directing myself towards them. And then feeling like when I reach them and they look the way I thought they'd look, I have succeeded. And when they don't, I have failed. That just feels like tangibly incorrect. And I have had the experience so many times of like, you could never have known what that would be like. How did you have a picture of it? And then of course it diverged, because how could you know what being a mother would feel like, writing a book would feel like, etc.
Yes. Yeah. It's the adventure of life.
Yeah.
It would be boring if we knew how it all was going to go down, even though part of us probably we think we want to know, but it would be really boring.
Yeah.
Oh, well, such a pleasure. I hope we stay in touch. And until next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Keep flourishing. Thank you for listening to the Power to Flourish podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling more seen, more supported, and more deeply connected to yourself. And if this episode resonated, would you take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend? It's one of the best ways to help this work reach the women who need it most. You'll find show notes, links, and resources from today's episode at powertoflourish.com. And now just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional support. And listening doesn't make me your therapist or doctor, though if you're looking for a coach, you know where to find me. All right, beautiful one, that's it for now. Until next time, trust yourself, honor your gifts, and keep flourishing.